Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, Israeli Defense Forces indicate the war with Hamas is likely to be a long one. And with about a month to go before the Iowa caucuses, the 2024 Republican presidential candidates are zeroing in on the Hawkeye State.
Plus, high pressure carries us into the weekend, but rain chances are looming by Sunday. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. President Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan traveled to Israel for talks with the nation's prime minister and members of the Israeli War Cabinet. The meetings come amid increasing tensions between the U.S. and Israel over the ongoing war in Gaza. CBS's Skylar Henry reports from Washington.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he plans to continue the war against Hamas until absolute victory, a mission that now involves close-quarter combat on the ground. The comments follow Netanyahu's meeting with White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in Tel Aviv to discuss Israel's operations in Gaza. Two U.S. officials tell CBS News the Israelis are saying the current phase of their offensive should be completed in 2 to 3 weeks, followed by lower intensity strikes and raids. With more than 18,000 dead in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, and Palestinian survivors experiencing starvation, dehydration, and disease, Israel faces an international outcry over the carnage. The White House continues to downplay comments President Biden made during a fundraiser this week, saying Israel could lose international support for indiscriminate bombing attacks in Gaza.
I want them to be focused on how to save civilian lives. Not stop going after Hamas, but be more careful.
On Wednesday, President Biden had his first face-to-face meeting with the families of Americans taken hostage by Hamas, including the parents of 23-year-old Hirsch Goldberg Poland.
I want my son home. I want the other 130 hostages also to be freed. 8 Americans kidnapped on October 7th remain unaccounted for. The Biden administration says it remains focused on bringing them home. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Israel's defense minister told Jake Sullivan that the war will last more than several months, so the next phase of targeted raids is likely to be a long one. As President Biden spoke with the families of Americans taken hostage by Hamas yesterday, some lawmakers had the chance to do so today. Civilian survivors of Israel's ongoing war against Hamas fought back tears to share stories of losing spouses, friends, and parents to the violence. Several senators, including South Carolina's Tim Scott, tried to assure the victims the United States wants to help.
Sense of urgency that we need immediately in resolving the challenges that Israel faces and the kidnapped people face is incredibly important.
A package containing aid for Israel is currently on hold as Republicans demand action at the southern U.S. border. But aid for the country does have bipartisan support.
We are on Sunset Watch on this Thursday evening. Here's a live look from UVA Wise over in Southwest Virginia. A beautiful sunset back in the distance. That current temperature 41 degrees. So as the sun sets this evening, those temperatures will continue to tumble. A little bit cooler in the Big Sandy Valley, down to 47 for Pikeville. A little bit warmer in the Cumberland Valley, up to 53 for London and 52 for Somerset, also Williamsburg. And again, all of us back in the 30s as we go later on into tonight. Up on first alert pinpoint Doppler as that strong ridge of high pressure continues to sit over the mountains. More clear weather on the way as we go into tonight. And again, we see mainly sunny conditions on Friday and more dry. Also sunny weather on tap to start the weekend. But we are tracking those rain chances to return by Sunday, also Monday. And once we get through that system by early next week, some more cooler conditions on the way by Tuesday. Some of us could stay in the 30s all day by Tuesday. Those details plus your full 7-day forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thank you. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump is making sure he is front and center with Iowa voters. There's fewer than 5 weeks to go before caucus goers will decide whether they'll give Trump's rivals a chance to build momentum or if they will send any of the GOP candidates packing. Mike Valerio gives us a sense of what's happening in the Hawkeye State.
The closing arguments from former President Donald Trump to potential Republican caucus goers in Iowa are now taking shape.
Were you better off 4 years ago, or are you better off today?
Wednesday, Trump kept the central focus of his speech and campaign event on defeating President Joe Biden in November, while also taking swipes at his GOP opponents.
What happened to the Haley surge? There's a surge going on.
Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, getting a boost in the first primary state, New Hampshire, where she secured an endorsement from the state's Republican governor, Chris Sununu. A major topic among New Hampshire voters, abortion.
Can't we find consensus? Can't we all agree to ban late-term abortions?
Back in Iowa, at a CNN town hall, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy predicted a decision from the U.S. Supreme Court next year will roll back the FDA's authority to send the abortion pill mifepristone through the mail.
I believe it will result in mifepristone being taken off the market until they go through the process that's ordained for every other drug that doesn't go through emergency approval.
A respectable showing in Iowa is also key for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the governor floating the idea to Iowa voters of moving the entire Department of Agriculture from Washington, D.C. to the Hawkeye State.
Iowa will have first dibs on the Department of Agriculture. We'll work with the people in Iowa to see, what they would want, how they would want to do it.
I'm Mike Valerio reporting.
Earlier today, House Republicans left for the year and reflected on a roller coaster session in Congress. The House will soon stand in recess and is not expected to return until next month. The break comes amid criticism a bill was not passed for additional aid funding for Israel, Ukraine, or border security. Then, when the congressional session resumes, there will be a number of bills waiting to be debated and voted on, including spending bills to avoid a government shutdown. Then there is President Biden's impeachment inquiry.
It's pretty shocking that the Republicans would vote to move forward with a formal impeachment after 12 months of investigating the same thing and finding no evidence connecting the president. In addition, it just shows that they're trying to distract from their ineptitude and their incompetence. They haven't done anything all year to help the American people.
Goldman also called the investigation a, quote, waste of taxpayer dollars. A New York appeals court has rejected Donald Trump's challenge to the gag order in his civil fraud trial. The order bars Trump and his attorneys from speaking publicly about the court staff or Judge Arthur Engoron, who is overseeing the trial. In their ruling, the appeals court said Trump did not use the proper legal vehicle to challenge the gag order and sanctions. Meanwhile, testimony in the civil fraud trial ended yesterday after 11 weeks in court. Former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani did not testify in his defamation damages trial over how much to pay two Georgia election workers. This comes after he and his lawyer repeatedly said he would take the stand. This week, an 8-person jury in Washington, D.C. heard gut-wrenching testimony from election workers Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. They opened up about how the lies spread by Giuliani damaged their reputations and upended their lives. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear an appeal from a man accused in the January 6th insurrection. The justices will look at whether part of a federal obstruction law can be used to prosecute Joseph Fisher. He was charged with multiple federal crimes for his role in the attack. The issue at hand is a specific provision of the law which makes it a crime for anyone who obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding, and what the government must prove with regard to intent. Today marks 11 years since the Sandy Hook shooting that took the lives of 26 people, including many children. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries held a news conference at the Capitol today to talk about how much more Congress should be doing to address gun violence. The latest problem Jeffries is addressing is gun safety legislation, something he says Republicans refuse to prioritize or even bring to the floor for a vote.
Extreme MAGA Republicans are trying to slash Social Security, cut Medicare, undermine a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions.
The Gun Violence Prevention Task Force says it's time for Congress to make some changes in the form of legislation. A federal judge says college athletes who transfer twice can play. Today, the judge issued a 2-week restraining order against the NCAA. Tennessee and 6 other states have filed a lawsuit. They argue the NCAA's transfer rule violates federal antitrust law. Student athletes are allowed to transfer once without having to sit out a year, but they need a waiver to transfer again. A hearing on the restraining order is set for December 27th. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, many of us are still shopping for the holidays, but are we all sticking to our budget? Tips to keep your spending in check.
Plus, more sunny weather is on tap tomorrow, but rain chances are not far away. Your forecast coming up.